Hi, and welcome back. Thanks for rejoining us on our ever-deepening guided meditation into source life, into the fundamental field of reality, of being. And at the end of our 22nd, this is our 23rd guided meditation, and they're all hopefully building deeply on each other and going deeper and deeper into getting the literacy of entering into the source language matrix, where we experience the deep interconnectivity of everything in my world, every word, every thought, every concept, every percept, whatever we have, it's all interconnected when we're deep in the space of being, the infinite field. And we have been focusing in the last two meditations especially, it's haunting us all from the very beginning of our journey, that if we are, and we've used the idea of the single brackets motherboard, a matrix that has been dominating our human condition for millennia. And that's been like the stage of information age, where thoughts are informational. They're true or false thoughts or beliefs or feelings, whatever they are, in that space. That's how we manufacture our mental spaces, our world, our self, our narratives, in that word space. And in contrast, we've seen that our preliminary great pioneers into source science. And what is source science? Source science is the attempt to get to the fundamental field. The fundamental field of reality, of being. There are many words for it, because once you begin to open up source science, and whether you use the language of God or Brahman or Om, whatever name you use for the source, it's clear it's not finite, it's infinite, transfinite. And it has infinite resources and infinite names, and all words come from it. And so we've been opening up these two matrices, the matrix of the source code. If you can get the covenant, the missing covenant, the code of the source, of the Logos, of Yahweh, of Allah, of Om, of Brahman, of Christ, whatever name we use, if we can get that code, we are in the zone, we are in that being, we're tapping being. We're in communion and union and unum with being. But if we're cut off from that, which we've suggested, our great teachers saw, we're using an adolescent, immature, premature stage of reason, of word, of language, of the language arts, of the mind arts, of mentation, how we use our minds in every aspect to make our life and our worlds and our narratives and our ID and ourselves. That mentation, if it's cut off from the source reality, it's going to be broken in some fundamental, endemic, intrinsic ways, and we're going to feel it, and it's going to haunt us day and night if we're broken from source. And we've been going through the transition from being de-source to source. And at the end of our last meditation, I suggested a meditative exercise. And remember, meditation cannot be done within the matrix of this motherboard. That's the whole point. Meditation is precisely recognizing it and going deeper into the source. So when we're source stationed, when we're in the fundamental field, we're zoning the field, that's meditation. The meditative art is to tap the field and enter the fundamental space. And that's what our great teachers have been pioneering all through the ages. So that the missing source science is not something new. It's been millennia. Let's say for the last 2,500 years, our great geniuses were calling us to try and find the way to get from de-source to source. Our great scriptures, our great enlightenment, our great wisdom teachers, first philosophy. In the Greek tradition of philosophy, it was realized that if you can get the language of being, if you can get the grammar, the code, the DNA of being, then we'll have the DNA for everything else, because everything else comes from being. That's why first science was considered to be first philosophy, before there was a split between science and philosophy. Wisdom and philosophy and science were inseparable in those classical times. And across the planet, all of these great geniuses were turning on to tapping what is first, and that's first philosophy, source science. But somehow we're not fully ready to bring out the difference and recognize when we're in the de-sourced matrix and when we're in the source, when we're in the deep source. And that's the missing code, the Unum Pluribus code. And with that we can get the mature form of source science, Unum science, integral science, integral reason, enlightenment, whatever name we use for it, the awakened mind, awakened reason, deep knowledge, integral knowledge, when we're in the zone. And that is first science. And so even though the blossoming of what we call science in the last 3 centuries has been magnificent, it seems to have displaced the importance of first ontology, of deep ontology, of first philosophy. And so that first science somehow got overshadowed or eclipsed or marginalized, whatever, but it was always there. And what we're seeking to do now is to tap the resources of our great teachers and scriptures and enlightenment traditions and technologies and breakthroughs and bring it together in the missing unum science, source science. And that's a double bracket space. The double bracket is a matrix of a deep logos code where we tap the DNA of reason, of the word, of consciousness, of knowledge, of our being. That's double bracket. Single bracket is when we're using a stage of language and reason and technology and meaning and truth and knowledge and science that is having information and using information to know. I know that snow is falling. I know that I'm a man. I know that, and that is the information space. And so in the last hologram, to capture, and it looks cluttered, but I hope you're getting more familiar with the power of this space, that the infinite space, double bracket, is infinitely surrounding all possibilities, all of our cultural life, all of our emotions and feelings and experiences, all of our worldviews, all of our logics, all of our disciplines, all of our scriptures can be read right here. In this space. This is what this line that makes it possible to have. Here is the thinker, I, and here is the screen of my awareness where all of my experience, my inner feelings and my outer perceptions and my cultural life and all events and all of the other worlds are all going on in this space. And so when we use single brackets to mark any word spoken in this language, this is a stage of reason, of language, of experience, of using the lens of our mind to make our world. So this is a stage of cultural development, cognitive development, brain development, word development, rational development. Huge. And I'm suggesting this is the technology, a single bracket matrix for using information. So when we say Google, let's Google whatever and we get the information on it, right? And we have knowledge. So knowledge here is not the same as knowledge here. So when our great texts and teachers of wisdom and enlightenment would say, knowledge here is enveloped in ignorance. That's one of the great axioms of classical wisdom. Knowledge, single bracket, is enveloped by ignorance, by a technology, a matrix that's cutting us off from source, and we can't see it and we can't know it, we're blind to it, and therefore we're in a deep ontological ignorance. And we labor under it, it's got us captive, and we're colonized and we're not free, because if our mind space is captured by a matrix that holds us captive at everything we see, all of our reason, all of our judgments, all of our cognition, all of our experiences, emotions, feelings, worship, politics, economics, everything is in that space, then we're not, if our mind is captured, then we can't be free. We're caged. So a free agent in deep ontology is not just not being imprisoned, but when we are imprisoned by the mind, colonized by a matrix, then we're in trouble. We're not truly free. We're not free range. And so our great teachers knew that we have to cross into the free range of the open space where I and the world, infinitely connected in the double bracket matrix, which is a more mature, rational word power, mind power, knowledge power, being power, when we are one with being in the deep space. And to make this crossing is all important. So we saw that every word in my language here, and I'd like to develop this point because this is hard to see, but it's so important, that when we use words in our everyday language, and that's what, this is our word space, this is our mind space, this is where we have our psyche, our psychological mind space experiences, all our cultures, all of our cultures are using this technology. So we can have different stories, different cultures, different worldviews, different ideologies, different belief systems here. We could have different disciplines. We could have the sciences and the arts all here. That's huge. There's huge wiggle room in the matrix of information. And this information age has been evolving and maturing and getting more and more powerful for let's say, for the last 3,000 years. This hologram is just trying to show a picture of our human development and evolution, looking over the last 3,000 years, and now trying to open it up and see it more deeply. The human condition is somehow here. Across the planet, across our cultures, we're using a technology that creates our human condition and our experience and all kinds of symptoms of life in this space. And our great teachers who crossed and saw and touched into the deep space, into the double bracket source life. So Buddha speaking from here and seeing our medical condition. Our cultural life here is suffering. That was a medical diagnostic from the high space, or the Buddha space. So our great geniuses who tapped this were trying to bring the medicine of the double brackets into the single bracket to help us cross over. So language here, word power here is not the same as word here. That's extremely difficult to get. I understand. So when we say in the beginning is the word, when John in his opening gospel said in the beginning is the word here, the infinite word. And the word was with God, and the word was God. And the word became flesh in getting to the Christ, and the Christ is here. And the Christ is the double bracket. And the Christ speaks the Logos code. So in the beginning is the Logos, so the Greek word for the infinite source of being, of mind, of speech, of the light of the mind, of reason. That's the Logos word. And you could use Yahweh, you could use Allah. We've seen this over and over. And how do you speak that language? How do you get the God code, the Logos code, the code of being? I prefer to use the word being, word, logic, language. How do you tap the grammar of the fundamental infinite word? And that's what we're marking up between single bracket space and life space here, that is cut off from access into the deeper space where we experience. So when we enter the zone of being, we experience immediately the communion and interconnectivity of the I-thou matrix, and this is an I-it matrix. And I know I've said this many, many times along our journey. And it's so easy to forget it and slip back, default into this and not realize this is I and it. So when we have information here, which is where we live, and our emotions, everything is rendered in this stage of language and psychology and mental thinking and culture. And we can have the plus or the minus. Like S is or isn't P. There's a logic. The logic is here. We can have different logics. We could have classical logic, we could have mathematical logic, we could have digital logic, we could have different logics, but they're still using a fundamental matrix that we can talk about it. All of these different cultures and worlds have information. All of our stories, our narratives, our belief systems are all here, and they're as diverse as they are, and even opposite. One says being, the other one says becoming. The one says unity, the other one says multiplicity. The one says theism, now it's atheism. The finite knows we have opposition here. These oppositions are still within the same boat. This is a very important principle of being in this motherboard matrix. It has a lot of wiggle room, vast wiggle room for many different stories and narratives and logics, alternative geometries. You could have different geometries here, different systems here, different belief systems. You could change your lens and you can go from Newton to Einstein and change your world. You can go from Christian to Muslim to Buddhist to yoga, theism, atheism, change your world. So that there are vast different lenses of our culture that I can share with my community here. And this is consciousness. This is the place that our consciousness lives, and this is where we process our information. And we manufacture ourselves here. So I become a thing that has all kinds of properties, and I make myself, we manufacture ourselves in the it space, the object space. And what's striking is that the great attempt of science to get to objectivity, the subject is here. This is a thinking subject who knows and is perceiving and has experience in psychology. That's here, subjective, and the objective is the object. The object of experience, what I see, the object of thought, the phenomena. All phenomena are showing up in the phenomenal box. This is the phenomenal screen that can take on many different worldviews and narratives and belief systems. And they compete for that space. Which is a true story? Which is the true belief system? Which is the true logic? Which is the true geometry? Which is the true scientific narrative? Which is the true theory? Because a theory is generated by the conceptual structure that we, not individually, but even my community, my scientific community and homies, my homies with me, who share that perspective. I and we are here. In my culture, we can share the same language, belief system, worldview, ideology here. So any word that's here, single bracket, we mark it with single bracket just to say I'm here. And when we cross into this language, double brackets, we're here. Right? So double bracket words and single bracket words. And we saw this arrow that there's a law of source ontology that every X, whatever you put in for the X is just a space holder. You could put I, you could put time, fill it in with any word you'd like. Every X is X. And you can have one diagram to show it, as we do here in the red. Wherever you are, every I is I. This is huge. This symbol, in a way, captures it. It means every X here has a deeper meaning when we go into. So at the end of our last meditation, I said, experiment with this. Because all of our great pioneering teachers are attempting to upgrade our words from here into the deeper space. So when Lao Tzu begins the Tao, that is named in this language level, is not the Tao. To get to Tao, to get to Om, to get to Christ, to get to God, you've got to upscript, not download. And so I said, try it. English, every English word, single bracket, whatever you put in for the X as a fill-in, then do an experiment, a meditative experiment. Say, I'd like to see what it would be like if I saw this word as infinitely connected in the fractal continuum of connectivity with everything else, because that's the unified structure of being, of reality. If we want to get real, take our words that we're familiar with here and morph them into that. And I don't want to suggest that when you go from this matrix into this matrix, you have to go from one place to the other. It can happen right where you are. This is very important. Going from your single bracket self to your double bracket self is not to go over there. It's to arrive where you are already. The great teachers knew that. Enlightenment is not going from an artificial identity and narrative and story and culture and belief system about myself as I've made myself here. It's not going far away. Enlightenment is not going far away. When you start to do this, when you begin to step away from this, then your double bracket self is already with you. That's what this is. Every X, whatever it may be, like this pen, if I can step it out of this matrix, then the deeper real pen is already there. Because you're already there. You can never get out of the infinite source. It's holding all of this together. So any item here has a double entendre between being in the box, single bracket, or out of the box. So you might say that the journey we're speaking of to go from the single bracket matrix to the double bracket matrix is to step back somehow from the dominance and being colonized by the single bracket mind space and opening up the integral holistic source code. Right where we are, we all have it within us. And our great wisdom teachers saw that. So somehow, in a way, the journey, what happens, what is the alchemy that happens to anyone who somehow steps back from the single bracket colonized matrix of information in whatever we're doing or feeling and have a high moment where we're in the double bracket zone? What happens when we change our matrix of the mind? I'd like us to think about that. That's called satori. That's called enlightenment. That's called doing yoga. I start off doing yoga in the box, and in my yoga, breathing and moving, I begin to meditatively morph into my yoga self. What is the magic to go from here to there? It's not a physical change. It's a switch in the lens of the mind from one to the other. And the double bracket lens is already with us all. And we've seen that's why we can have spontaneous high moments. We don't know what did I do? I was out in the soccer field and I was soccering. I was running in nature and I became the running. I blissed out. It was not me running. It was running was happening. Double bracket running. I was the running. It wasn't the property that I have. It wasn't I was running, but running was flowing. When we're being, we're flowing. When we're flowing, it's beyond the information box of Google. You can't Google the information. It's transinformational. You begin to become immersed in the field of reality in a primary way, and that's the I am self. When we're I aming, we're zoning. When we're zoning, we're we're tapping it. And somehow we get that, happens to us in our high moments in peak performance. When athletes know, and artists and lovers know, we were in the zone. We were just out of ourselves. We were beside ourselves. We stepped out of the blinders and we're already there. So the double bracket reality, being, is already with us. That's amazing. That's that gives us such hope. It's not that I have to go far away. It's just that I here have to journey to there. This is already with me. So somehow we have the capacity as humans to step back from a dominant matrix and realize that we're already in the deep space. So I suggested that as a meditative experiment to go more deeply this time into our attempt to say, okay, now that we have are opening up the Unum science, the medical ontology, the double bracket lens of science, source science, deep ontology, medical ontology, and now look from the double brackets into our human condition and all of the effects of our lives, every aspect of our lives, our personal lives, our lives in language, in thought, in cognition, in reason, in meaning, in truth, in judgment, in ethics, our life in politics, in human relations, in our workplace, in economics, and our interfacing with material stuff in the world, all of the different symptoms we see of addiction and angst and fear of death, and we just go on and on with codependent breakdowns, with being disintegral and not having a coherent identity, all of the symptoms that we have, all of that is traced to being desourced. That is a striking disclosure that we have not sufficiently looked at. We healers and teachers and life coaches and scientists and medicine, men and women, trying to heal the symptoms that we discover in the motherboard matrix of information and looking at the symptoms and diagnostic here. So if we look at an addictive, experienced person having addictive problems here, and we don't see that could addiction whether it's the alcoholism, the opioids, or whatever the form of attachment, sex addiction, or addicted to needing attention, or money, or wealth, or whatever the addiction. What is that addiction about? Well, if we diagnose it here and try to stop the drinking, or to stop taking that substance and substance abuse, right? Are we getting to the deeper medical condition of being addicted to a thought, mind operating process that's generating those symptoms, whatever they may be? Buddha saw that we are addicted to a pattern of thinking, a matrix. Those words were not used. We're trying to clarify centuries of research. We're addicted to a thought processing, a mind operating process, a matrix, a logistic, whatever name we want to use. I don't want to get fancy. with names. We're using a thought form that's so deeply implanted that allows me to see and to think and to reason and to use language and word and share my culture and participate in meaning, and everything about my culture and life is coming from a matrix of information. And that matrix, as good as it is in giving us the capacity to have all of the blessings of word power and reason power and language power and judgment and cognition and art and all of the beautiful aspects of our cultural lives, as well as it's also, when we see it more deeply, it's cutting us off from access to the source of being. And to be de-sourced is to then enter into a systemic fragmentation and polarization. That's what we've seen over and over as a deep symptomology from source science, from Unum science, from integral science, from the double bracket lens. So I'm juggling many themes, and I'm suggesting that the maturation of Unum source science, first philosophy, is an ancient, long evolving emergence that's been being massaged for 2,500 plus years by all of our great geniuses seeking to get to first philosophy, first wisdom, the language of the first, to get to being, to get to the primal word. And all of our great theologies of trying to get God. What is the DNA for God? The God talk, theology, the signs of God, for example, are subtexts of first science, first philosophy. And we don't have to go to God talk to do it. It's really being, the deepest form of being. What is infinite being? Can we get the code for being? And is the infinite being the infinite word? Yes. So the word here, this is just collecting the exercise I asked and invited us to participating in. How do we go from words here to words here? The deep word, the infinite word. And it's extremely difficult to understand when you say in the beginning is the word, the infinite word, and the word is being, and being is, and then you begin to see all of those words are infinitely connected. That's the Unum. That's what's been so difficult for us humans to get. The Unum pluribus of the infinite source, the DNA for being, is infinite Unum, infinite unity. Unum from the Latin, as we've seen, is unity. Infinite unity is infinite. And if we talk about the infinite here, it's not the infinite. We can't download the infinite into this space because it finitizes. It's defined, it's definite, it's definite, it's got identity. If I try to give an identity to it and name it and put it in this space, right, I've cut it off from the infinite. So if I put God here, I'm cutting off God from God. So we have to somehow learn the difference between single bracket words and double bracket words. The same word. And that's where I invited you to join me in a meditative lab experiment, to take words in your life that are familiar and say, can I take the word time and take it to time? What would double bracket time be like? It's a miracle. If I can do it, if I can go from time, so what is time here? Well, if I put time here, then past, present, and future are separated because the past is over, the future is not yet, the present is shifting, it's flighty. And that's single bracket time. And it can be very stressful to live in this time. But if I can go into time in the double brackets because of the infinite connection, then time and space and mind and word and world are all in flow. You can't narrow down time, it opens up fractal. And because of infinite Unum, double bracket time is the meeting of all times in one moment. Billions of years of the past and into the future. You can't separate the past and the present and the future. They're not the same, but they touch and they interflow. So if I can step into now time, double bracket time, then I've come home to being. Because time is being and being is space. And space and mind and world are inseparable. And they're inseparable from, if you use God talk, from Yahweh, from Allah, from Om, from Tao, from Buddha nature. When we learn that language, and any word there, space, infinite fractal space. Well, does space touch time? Obvious, space-time. Does time touch mind? Yes, it's mind-time. Does word touch world? Yes, word-world. Everything touches. That's high voltage. That's a fractal DNA of the language of being, of first philosophy, first science. the missing signs. So any word we take the pen here. Can I put the pen here? If you put the pen here, you can't look at the pen from this mind. This technology blocks the mind from, the mind has to go to meet the pen in the zone. It's an I-thou experience, not an I-it. Here it's an it, an object. Here it's a presence. And it opens up with vast meaning. The word color will touch all the other qualities. Matter, the thing, opens up to touch the entire range of the field. Every word opens up and resonates and touches every other item in the universe. And so that transformation is going from the single bracket vocabulary, English to English. And I call that ZenGlish, playfully. So if I can learn the language, the missing language, source language of ZenGlish, every word that is in the ZenGlish is connected with every other. And if I can go there, and so when the wisdom of the planet says, be here now, here is separate, but here is now, here now, being here now is to be here. That's one of the summations of all of the wisdom of the call to source science. Be here now. It's not here. Because being is cut off from, existence is cut off from being. And here, space is cut off from time. And to get the space-time link, you've got to go into the space-time continuum. And when you go there, you get into the continuum of the entire field. So every word, I mean, when you begin to do that, how about stress? Well, if I want to treat stress, I'm feeling stressed in my life, and I want to use some mindfulness meditation to get rid of stress, and I'm using my best medicine that I can get here to stop my stress. But stress is being caused by being desourced. The distress of being cut off from myself and from my being is showing up here. So many, all of our symptoms of pathology and dysfunction and breakdowns that happen, that we name, that's familiar with us here, try to take those words and put them into the double bracket where you begin to see something here. When you put fear of death here into here, death to death. Death has a different meaning in the deep space of being than it does here in the single bracket. Single bracket death, we say that's a fact of life is death, but when we understand double bracket death, that's a whole other depth of understanding. It transcends death. Double bracket death is tapping life. So life here is cut off from life here. So when Jesus is speaking this double bracket speech, he says, I am the life, I am the truth, I am the way. Strange talk, but that's double bracket zone talk, that's source science. And we suggested last time that these great geniuses are true. Jesus, the truth of Jesus, I am the truth, I am the way, is source science. When Buddha is giving the noble truths of seeing the Buddha Dharma, that's source science. When Krishna is giving the truth of yoga, that's source science. And truth here is not the same as truth here. We need to pause and think about that. Because when we're cut off from source, from the fundamental word, I hope you're beginning to get a sense of it. This is like pioneering into a new frontier. When word here in the zone, where everything is infinitely connected, that is, we need a deeper technology of consciousness than we have, where we informationize it and use identity to name tags and create separate items in units and then try to put them together. That's what this calculus does. Whereas this technology allows the infinite flow and co-flowing of everything we touch and experience in our life. And that's the language of being. And that's what integral holistic means. Integral is not here. This is just integral by its nature. Why? Because the technology that we're using is either or. S is or isn't P. The subject is or isn't the predicate, and we make judgments about that. And here the thinker says yes or no. Doors being closed, yes or no. I say door is closed. We judge, we affirm, we hope, we intend, we believe. We despair, we feel. All of our mental life is going on around these items of thought that are objects of thought and feelings. I hate you, I love you. I'm angry, I'm sad. Those are informationized mind bites of my psyche in this space. So if I say I love you, that love is not the same as being in love. Being is love, because love is interflow. The deep intimacy of communion with the other, the I and the other are so infinitely interwoven that he, she, whomever your lover is, you're intimately other. Otherness is real. That's a pluribus. There's infinite pluribus, so every item here is unique and other. There's otherness, but connected in the Unum. So otherness here in the I-thou calculus is not the same as otherness here between I and not I, the other, the it. And when we objectify the other, the I, then with our lens, then that object, even though we speak of objectivity, and this is huge what I'm now suggesting. Our great first philosophers knew that what we call science, for example, which is refined common sense, methodical, disciplined common sense of using our minds and our experience and our empirical here. Empirical means pertaining to the senses, what the senses see. And we use the evidence of our senses and our experiments to verify our theoretical projections and hypotheses to get to objective truth. But objective truth is still subjective. Objective truth here in this space, because it's cut off from source, from the foundation of knowledge and reason, is going to still always be based upon relative to the narrative that you're holding. So truth is truth for us, truth for me, truth for you, truth for this culture, that culture, truth for this religion, this ideology, that ideology. And so the politics of truth here is that it's relative to the lens of the mind that you're using, your culture. So to speak of intercultural truth is that my culture has my truth, my meaning, what makes sense to me, what I judge, what I hold, what we as a community hold and share in our shared belief system, right? That's shared truth. That is still subjective and grounded in the shared conventions of that belief system and worldview. Truth is grounded in reality. So double bracket truth, if you go from single bracket truth to double bracket truth, that's when you hit truth. And you live it and you be it, and it's fractal and it's open, and it's pluribus, it has... So the truth of Allah, the truth of Yahweh, the truth of God, the truth of Buddha, the truth of yoga, the truth of... the truth of science understood here are connected to the Unum pluribus. The Unum is the foundation. Source science is getting to the foundation, the deep grammar of being itself, of the word, of reason, of logos. And when you have the logos, you have the connection and the interconnectivity, and that's where you find the ground, the foundation of truth. If you're cut off from the foundation and from the Unum power, then it's going to be, what is your truth here? Your narrative is true. Your thought, if you say snow is white, well, that's true if it's a fact out there in the world that snow is white. I have a thought, snow is white. It refers to pictures of fact out in the world. But if I change my culture, I change my facts. If I change my worldview or belief system, I change my meaning. So my truth is the truth of my narrative, and my narrative goes back to what lens am I using to make my world and my worldview and my belief system that I embrace. I affirm my world. And we, my shared culture, my homies that share with me that world, we share that truth. So truth, single bracket truth, is truth for us. It's relative. It's not grounded. This is major. And so that although the quest of first science and first philosophy was to get to the DNA for being, because that would be the foundation of truth. And when Descartes in his meditation was seeing he could doubt his whole life. All of his beliefs could be wrong. Even mathematics could be wrong. If there's a demon tricking his mind to believe it. Because believing and judging and affirming and interpreting, we humans interpret all that appears to us. We're interpreters. And therefore I'm using my judgment to interpret what appears. So what appears to me seems true to me, but what if you're wrong? What if you're being deceived by what appears to you? And this is where phenomena, all my events, and phenomena is the word, the technical word for what shows up. My feelings, my emotions, my mental states, perceptions of the outside world, perceptions of others, all of that, all the news, all of the events going on here. And I could be wrong. Because how do I know my judgment could be wrong? So what's grounding me? Well, if I'm not grounded in the source, in reality, in being, then it becomes grounded by me. So it's my opinion. So knowledge, my truth, is my belief and affirming that story, that narrative to be true. And if we share different narratives, we have different truths. So truth here is relative to the beholder of the truth, or those who share that perspective, or that lens, or that worldview, or that enterprise. So truth here is not truth here. So when Buddha, Jesus, Krishna, Moses, the truth, speaking of the truth, when Jesus says, I am the truth, for example, and Buddha is speaking truth, the Four Noble Truths here, that truth is the truth of source science. Unum pluribus truth, the foundational truth of the Logos. And we used that word Logos before. Sophia. Logos Sophia. Sophia, infinite wisdom of the feminine energy embodied in the world. So that the language here, and reason here, and cognition here, and psyche here, when we're trying to understand what is the psyche like in the double bracket space, well, there's a whole movement on the planet called transpersonal psychology. And Carl Jung, Freud was trying to understand how does psyche, the id, the ego, the superego, and understand the psychological phenomena and the unconscious and the conscious, and how to do therapy to bring the unconscious to the conscious. And Jung was saying that there's a collective unconscious. And that opened up the transpersonal psychology. But we're still not there. You need double brackets to get transpersonal psychology. Because you could have all of those differences. You could have Freud over here and Jung over here. You could have theism and atheism. The opposites are both within the same box. Please look deeply into that principle, that truth. The single bracket rational space allows and encourages either or. S is or isn't P. If you have is, then you can have the isn't. So if you say, well, is better, then you go that way. You've got modernism. We hold these truths to be self-evident. If you say there is no is, there isn't, then it's always different. It's not the same. So unity or plurality. Well, if unity is not rich enough to hold it together, then let's go to plurality or diversity. So it's unity or diversity. Which one do you choose? You can't get both. Unity versus diversity. Being versus becoming. Theism versus atheism. All of these are modernism or postmodernism. They're in the same box. I know that's going to have to be another meditation down the road. To understand that when you're in the single bracket matrix, it's either or and polar and bipolar by its very nature, by the law that's generating that level of information in the box. It allows of opposites stories, opposite narratives. It has incredible flexibility to get multiple different alternatives in the box. And history for 2,500 years has been the swing between opposites. Being, no, it's becoming. Is, no, it isn't. So isn't is what's always othering. So if there is no is and nothing is static, then it's always different. If it's always different, then reality is shifting. So if becoming is a headline, all is becoming, then it's not being. Being is eternal. No, reality is becoming. So is it unity? No, it's diversity. Is it modernism? No, it's postmodernism. Is it theism? No, it's atheism. Is it reason? No, it's the senses. Is it mind? No, it's the body. And on and on. I know I'm being passionate about this, but when you look at the 2,500 years from double bracket eyes, the Unum eyes of reason, of our great teachers encouraging us to do the Unum science, and you look at the human history over these millennia, you see the swing, that samsara, back and forth, opposite. And so we've been doing that for centuries. we get the alternative one story, reject that story, let's go to the opposite. But you're in the same boat. That's the point. And this boat is the Titanic. All of these narratives are fighting it out in opposition. Is it Yahweh? No, it's Allah. Is it Allah? No, it's God. Is it Christ? No, it's Buddha. Either or. And it's all going in the same boat. The opposites and all of the alternatives are sharing the same matrix, and therefore they're in the same boat. That's hard to really process, but that's what's going on. So when the great genius, Nagarjuna, the great Buddhist, coming 600 years after Buddha, said we've got to go the middle way. The middle way is not between the opposites here. The middle way is not the midpoint between the opposites, between too much and too little. It's the middle way is going into the Buddha space, crossing into the matrix of the Buddha. That is the middle way. That is the way of Jesus. That's the way of Krishna. That's the way of yoga. So when you begin to see the signs, why are these great gifted minds who are looking into source science are echoing each other in different ways, in different narratives, but they're seeing the same axioms, the noble truths of the source space? So that our experiment in taking words from the single bracket to the double bracket, from English to English, double bracket English, every word has to be upgraded. And so we've got to really, so source science is language learning. The missing language, the double bracket language code. We don't need new words, we just need to get the words down to their source. We don't need to throw out English, save English. The sentences, if I say snow is what, or this is mountain here, or this is a pen, this is a mountain, or here I am, right? You could say it here. This is a mountain. This is earth. This is the sun. The sun, double bracket. So if you say it here, you're cutting it off. But when you say those words here, then they open up. So how do you go from the single bracket matrix to the double brackets? What is the shift in the mind operation to go? We have both of them. We have the single bracket, which is dominating us. That's our default, deeply entrenched habit. We don't even see it. And it's controlling our minds and holding us captive. And we're calling it out now. Check it out. You need double brackets to see the single brackets. And once you see it, and the language, it says, wow, every word, single bracket, has a deeper double bracket power. And I can be I am. And that's a liberation of the highest order. God is not God. If you say God here, I hope you did that experiment. If you say God here, and then you say God here, it's a immense, because here it's finite, here it's infinite. You can't house the infinite in the single bracket finite space. This is finite, this is transfinite, infinite. And our deep language and being is infinite, transfinite, fractal, interflow. And we need a double bracket technology to handle it. So reason, single bracket reason, can be pathological if it's dominated here. Science, if it's in the box and we haven't called it out. So has science, I'm asking a question for all of us, really. Science is beautiful. And we're trying to see the fantastic power and glory of the scientific intelligence. And science is powerful, but if it's dominated by a matrix that it hasn't called out and looked at, and answered the question, are we scientists using a matrix here and trying to get truth and correct theoretical verification and vindication of our narrative about the cosmos, about humanity, about biology and chemistry and all of our great science, great as they are, is it's laboring under a mind operating process that's so deep that we haven't really seen it and called it out, which we're suggesting has been the case and been seen, that we've been desourced. Desourced science is not double bracket science, and we may not see it, but as you suggested, all cognition here, whatever the community, whether it's a religious community, Christians, Jews, Muslims, whoever we are here using, if we're using and being used within this, if I'm using my worship and my scripture and my religious life within this space and I haven't called it out, then science and religion and politics and all of our cultural life is going to be in the same boat. And that is a stunning disclosure. That as long as we're desourced, all of us, whatever my discipline, whatever my belief system, whatever my truth, whatever my meaning, whatever language I'm speaking, whatever cultural worldview, whatever belief system, if I'm laboring under the matrix of the information box as where we make our worlds and our mental states and our lives and our cognition and our reason and use it here, it could be impaired. So reason here is not the same as reason here. What is reason? Getting the links, being the links, seeing the links, joining the links, being interlinked, coherence, connectivity, sense. We make sense here. We have meaning here, but meaning here is powerful when we go into the source word. So when Buddha is speaking from the source word, or Jesus or Krishna, for examples, Socrates is trying to get to the logos, to understand that's reason. When reason is turned on, and we understand the interconnectivity and experience it, we don't do it from the outside. We're always outside of the word space. Our mental space is being produced here to picture the world out there, and it depends upon us. And we tend to be self-sourced. This is a great, important, vital point, that narratives in this thought form are not grounded in the source. Here's the ground, here's the source. But we're cut off from the source. So we are self-sustaining, allegedly. So my story about myself, I am, and I have my narrative. Am I self-sustaining, or is the source sustaining me? My source self. What sustains and holds ontologically in terms of reality? Reality sustains us. And if we're cut off from reality by creating our realities here, reality here, single bracket reality, is not real. And yet we take it to be real. So my reality as a Muslim, and my reality as a Christian, and my reality as a Jew, and my reality as a scientist, and whatever my reality as an American, whatever nationality, whatever culture, whatever civic space, my reality cut off within this space is not real. This is being. Being is reality. And we can't fake the foundation. We can't fake the ground. Reality is what grounds truth, and truth is unum pluribus. And if we don't have the unum, we're fragmented, we're broken off. So I've taken time in this meditation to play this out, because this is a blind spot for us. We don't realize that when we're living in the space and using reason, even though it's being held by the logos here, always, everything we do is being sustained by the foundation, by the ground. But we're cut off from it, and then what happens then? Who sustains me? Well, I'm my own being. This ego-based human, this that I make myself here. What is an ego? An ego is an entity created by this technology that gives me all of my properties and my attributes, and my CV and my bio is all here, my narrative, my story, my worldview. I'm a bundle of all of my history, and here's my bio here. I am making my bio here. So that it comes back to me. I'm processing myself here. And then, therefore, I'm making myself an it. This is an it. It. This technology of content, of information, of Google information is, as we saw last time, if we don't understand the deeper, if we don't understand the single bracket matrix, then we're in a deep ontological ignorance. We brought that theme up last. Ontological ignorance means that we're using a matrix that we don't see and can't. It's a blind spot. It makes us see what I can't see it. When I'm I-itting, I can't see the matrix. So when I call this hologram is meant to help us call it out and says, wow. Right? And we might say that's nonsense, and you could reject it and walk away, but pause and think about it. Because when you look at the evolution of 2,500 years of our great geniuses, they saw something was wrong. When you're living in the space and you're cut off from the source, something is wrong in your being, and you're going to feel it, because the infinite force is infinite at every point, here and there. And even though we are cutting it off, it's still here within us at every moment. That's what this is saying. Every X is X. It's already here. So there's a double entendre, a double matrix going on. There's the X and the double bracket right here, right now. And my single bracket matrix is covering up and eclipsing reality, being, me. And yet it's calling us. So the double bracket, the infinite force, is operating infinitely at every point. So that the call to being is the greatest force in the universe. The call to authenticity, to meaning, to truth, to reality, to connectivity, to relation, to love, is the greatest force of the universe. And if our technology is blocking us from that, and we're caged in by our mental matrix, our mind operating process, our culture making and self making and relation making in that space, we're going to feel it at every moment. And that's where we were in the last meditation. And if we did medicine, ontological medicine, source medicine, saying, okay, folks, if you're cut off from your being, it's going to show up in vast, diverse symptoms in your life. Like addiction, right? If you're living your life here in this space and you're cut off from yourself and you want to find yourself and you're trying to find, how do you find it? How do you find the I and the not I? And you're looking in this space, the not I. This is the I and this is other. This is the not I. And I process myself in the object not I space. And if you're doing that, you're making yourself an entity, an object, a being. A being here is not being. When you're being, you're leaving this matrix and entering into the DNA of being. You're in the zone. You're in peak performance. You're in flow. You're in connectivity. You're in the Christ. You're in the yoga. You're in the Buddha. You're in reason. You're in enlightenment. You're in the logos. And this is calling us. But if we're here and caged in, we'll feel it, and it's going to create all kinds of symptoms. That's obvious. Death, haunted by death. What is death? Well, death is a fact of life. Here, death is here. Single bracket, death is here. What does it mean? The end of my being. But what would death be like here if we understood it the way our great teachers saw it? So when Jesus is speaking, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life, double bracket life. And if you believe in me, and you can't believe, belief is here. I believe, not this belief, but belief here, which is what? Communion. And you can't have it without the Christ code. So when you're double bracket coding, then you're believing and you're in communion with the Christ, and that's everlasting life. So unless you die, you can't be born again. That kind of talk. These are local, powerful axioms of that life here is a kind of death life. Life and death, the opposites, are connected. They're in the same. Life and death are like all opposites in the same boat. So single bracket death and single bracket life are connected together in the space. But life here is a deeper, powerful life. We want life. So when we're facing aging, I'm stressed, I'm cut off, I don't feel intimacy, I don't feel love. My life is empty. I don't have real meaning, because meaning here is artificial. Meaning here is the real deal, because it's meaningful, and mindful, double bracket is mindful, is meaningful is the word. So the infinite word is infinite meaning flow, infinite interconnection, right? So you can't sever word and being and truth and reason. They're interconnected because of the Unum infinite connection. That's extremely difficult to process. And although our different great wisdom teachings have been hinting and saying that in so many ways, until we have the double bracket code, we can't say, oh, that's what it means in the beginning is a word. Not this word, but word. What is word? Being. What is it? Infinite. Being is infinite. What does it mean? The word is infinite, which that means all words come from word. Bam. That's huge. That means that any narrative, any word comes from the word. Any word we utter, any sign comes from the deep, infinite source. Any narrative, any scripture, any belief system, any paradigm, any story, any history, any discipline, whatever it is, it's coming from the source. It can't not. So how do we go to tap the deeper primal word, which is being? I hope you follow, because it's, in the beginning, being is infinite. What is? Reality is infinite. Then being is infinite. And that means everything is connected to it. And that means whatever, it has all names, infinitely. So any name you have here in the broken off space, when you transport it and upgrade it into the double bracket meaning, suddenly it opens up and it connects with the entire field. So we cannot sever word and being and meaning and life and love and relationship and truth and communion. All of those are meeting in the same Unum. And our teachers began to see that in the missing Unum signs. And that's deep reason. The Logos is reason. And the journey of humans is to rise into the Logos. And that's wisdom. And unless we have wisdom, we cannot have justice, said Plato. Until we have wisdom in the leadership, we cannot have justice in the polis. The polis, the society, the republic, is going to be broken. Because everything here is fragmented. By the very nature of the matrix, it fragments and polarizes. So everything is polarized into pluralism and bits, as you have Babel. You don't have real communication and dialogue. So the I-thou script matrix is where we have communication. And the meeting of diversity is meeting in this space. This is the place of peace and compassion and love and relationship and intimacy and sacred. This is sacred space. This is desecrated because it's cut off from the source. So I hope we're together in following this. My intention as a meditative guide, a guided meditation into source life, that's what we're seeking to do deeper, one session after the other without losing the prior 1 through 23. And we're in the 23rd session of making it come to life. And I'm seeking as a coach, if you're going to teach source science, you've got to stand in that power and speak from that power and call it out. And that's so every session I'm trying to deepen the voltage and access for us together to enter into, because it's our birthright to be in this space and to speak in the high ground. And all of our great teachers are calling us to rise and upscript into the higher matrix and not to download into where we are, which is what we've been chronically doing. So let's sum up. And in our next meditation, the 24th meditation next, we're going to build on this and try to bring it home in terms of, say, if we're looking into, take an example of the American civic space culture here, and to see that the civic space is fragmented and broken, and we cannot be we the people. And 1776, we said last time, is understood in the double bracket space. The constitutional, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all humans are endowed by the Creator, source, with unalienable rights of life, liberty. We must have the double bracket code to get the 1776 Constitution. If we do 1776 here, single bracket, it's not e pluribus unum. Out of the many, the one. Is out of the many, the unum. This is the e pluribus space of we the people. This is where, with all of our diversity, we can heal. So when people speak, let's heal the soul of America. I'm just picking on the American example. We could go anywhere around French, German, British, English, UK, India, Pakistan, the nations of Africa, South America, Asia, wherever we turn on the planet, same principle holds. we humans have to upgrade from being dominated and caged to free-range humans. And that's when we flourish as a human family. This is Babel, and this is how we overcome. The tribes meet in this place. All the scattered tribes and narratives and belief systems and worlds, the pluribus, without the unum, are scattered. But to get the unum pluribus, we have to go to the meeting ground, the dialogue, deep dialogue, I-thou, sacred encounters and communion with each other in our diversity. This is when we become a true individual. So all of the battles we've had in this space, is it capitalism or communism? Is it individualism or socialism? So Karl Marx, in trying to say we've got to, in Das Kapital, we've got to go from to see that there's a transformation, a dialectic, dialectical materialism, but it's not. Hegel thought it was the spirit that was moving it, and Marx said no, because from Hegel to Marx, again another opposition, but they're in the same boat. And Karl Marx is saying that we have to go to communism. in order to have the justice and equity and the flourishing of humans in the commune, not the individual capitalism narrative, but in the communism. And so the Cold War of the 20th century was between the democratic capitalist base and the communist and whatever has evolved. But ironically, the American polis is in an internal Cold War. It didn't go away. There's still ideological strife and polarization and gridlock, and one side can't talk to the other, and alternative facts and alternative realities. And it's rampant in the culture at this point, as great as we are. If America is the greatest nation on earth and the land of the free, is it free? To free the slaves and to have women vote and gay rights, and so are we still in the matrix of the colonized human here? Are we still caged in our discourse, in our minds, in our worldviews, by a matrix? Or are we free-range humans? Where is the land of the free and the home of the brave? And where is the home of the slaves? This is strong language. But our great teachers knew that to get freedom, moksha, freedom, we've got to rise. When Krishna is coaching Arjuna, who is here and broken down, to come to freedom. Not my will, but thy will be done. The will, when we're here, the Dharma, the Buddha Dharma, that's when we're free. Philosophers have seen that. When you're with the law of the Logos, then you're free. When you're here in this space, then you're bound. So as we go down deeper and deeper, we're going to keep deepening. Obviously, this is just the beginning of a journey, because when we start to look at history, and if you stay with me, I'm going to keep on going deeper and deeper to look at the many great strands that are really echoing this journey from here to here. So basically, to sum up at this point, because that's a lot to handle, and I hope you'll join me in the next sequel as we go deeper into this. So to sum up, what should be focused on? The Unum Pluribus Integral Science of the double bracket technology in matrix, where everything is interconnected. When we use the medicine, source ontology, being is medical ontology from this place to look into the human condition, which is desourced, we begin to see that this matrix is creating all kinds of effects and symptoms that if we try to solve them in this space, we're going to hit the wall and it's not going to be good medicine. Source medicine, if we have anxiety, if we have stress, if we have addictions, and we try to deal with the addiction locally, and not to see we're addicted to a technology, a matrix, and it's cutting us off from ourselves, and therefore it's going to create all kinds of attempts to solve and medicate and deal with the anguish that comes from being cut off from ourselves. So we need a revolution in medical science to go to unum pluribus medicine, source medicine, medical ontology. That we can be ontologically ill being. If we're cut off from being, we're ill. If our being is ill, we'll see vast symptoms in every aspect of our lives. That's one of the things we should be looking at. So in our political life, yes, we see the fragmentation and the deterioration. Democracy cannot be here. Democracy has to be here. True, we the people. We cannot be we here. We're scattered by the nature of the matrix. There are many we's. So if we use the American example and say, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, that kind of talk. No, there's not one nation. There are many subcultures and worldviews. Many Americas, many people, highly divisible. Not under Logos, under God, under Source, not under Unum, but under Pluribus. And so our political life can be in a medically dysfunctional form. Just for example. So whether we look at our personal, my psyche, how do I feel living in a desourced life? And I want meaning, and I don't know even have the words for it. I can't even identify it. I have addictions, I have compulsions. I have patterns in my life that are self-sabotaging. I feel empty. I don't want to be here. I want out. And some people can have suicidal thoughts because they don't want to be here, because the lights are off. And they don't know this, they don't know that this is accessible. They don't know how to go from single bracket to double bracket. And so the only way out is to off it, to end it, for example. It's serious. So all of the many human disorders of a life crisis, because life itself here is cut off from itself, and therefore it's pathological and dysfunctional, and we're going to try and solve it and medicate it because it's calling us constantly. And we don't have the technology, we don't have the science, we don't have the medical ontology and the vocabulary and the lens and this technology of the double brackets to name it and see that there's incredible hope. We're always held by the infinite source. It's right here with us right now. We don't have to go far away, it's right here already. How do we open it up and find access and change the matrix of our mind to come into flourishing and come into peace and come into joy and bliss and connectivity and love and compassion? How do we do this personally and as a culture collectively? So next meditation we will go more deeply into that and take some more detailed examples of symptoms being located here and not being seen from the deeper medical ontology, and what happens when we take a symptom here and see it from the double bracket medical lens. And what our great wisdom teachers and scriptures have already shown us as a way to heal and come to wholeness and to enter nirvana and to have the bliss of being and to understand and feel the love and be in the love. To be is to be in love. Being is being in love. And love is the Unum connection and flow and intimacy. And we're meant to do that. And so it's really been tragic, looking over 3,000 years of hitting our heads against the wall of our single bracket matrix and not even having the words and the intelligence and the tools to call it out and see it. And therefore we try to solve the problem here. And all of our attempts to solve our dysfunctions and our suffering and our pain existentially in this space are going to hit the wall and it's not good medicine. So the greatest activism, single bracket, is not going to be activism. We need double bracket activism to address the single bracket crises. And what we called earlier the invisible crisis is that we're living a crisis individually and culturally and everywhere, interculturally, on this planetary situation that's generated from a matrix that's cutting us off from being, and we don't have the tools to call it out and see it and say, okay, I see you now, single brackets. I see that the matrix was there. I see how you've been holding me and operating on me and holding me captive in that space and all of our others around us in my culture. And to see it is the beginning of the revolution, to say it's over. No more will the single bracket hold me captive. I'm going to be a free agent. Because when we're not free, it really calls us deeply. We humans, if we're caged, just think, we'll end on this note. If I'm imprisoned, which is one form of not being free, or I'm in a relationship that feels imprisoning, and I don't feel a way out, I feel trapped, or I'm in a political culture that's tyrannical with a regime that holds me captive and I'm not free, and I don't have free speech, and I can't feel safe in that regime, then the deepest urge is to get free. Overthrow that and get free for life, liberty, well-being. And that's what 1776, for example, is saying. Whenever any political band that holds us together and brings us together violates our right to be, life, liberty, it's our duty to separate from it. That's a double bracket reading of 1776, to separate from this and enter into the higher cultural civic space. So in our next meditation, we're going to go into the political space, the economic life, the personal life, right? And to understand why is it that our rational language space itself is already fragmented and dysfunctional? How can reason be polarized and fragmenting and dysfunctional? Can reason itself, single bracket reason, not be double bracket reason? And if we're rational beings, we've got to upscript into reason, into the logos. So please, that's a lot to digest and absorb. Thank you for staying with me and accompanying us on this journey. And let's take a break. And I wish you well. And I do hope I don't scare you away and that you join us as we go deeper and deeper. Thank you very much.